are very present in certainly a lot of the business contexts I've worked in. Um, I am not so sporty, so I had to learn a lot of sports metaphors. But yeah, you're mentioning a lot of perhaps indirectness. Um, there's a lot of presupposition, perhaps, to be unpacked. I love it. All right, so you'll have these slides, so you can return to these as you continue thinking about it. Can we go back to the slides for a second, Tom? I'll do my next couple slides, and then we'll come back over to the Google Doc. But keep populating the Google Doc, please. So I have the next slide is what this workshop is not about. I've alluded to this. So I realized there was a workshop that I gave not too long ago on a similar vein called Keywords, using this book. If you want to click to the next slide, this book is being very critical about the dehumanizing language of capitalism. This is not that. I am not here to say that I am a poster child for capitalism and that I'm really excited about the ways that late stage capitalism dehumanizes and oppresses and destroys our planet, all the things. So you won't hear me talking, enthusiastically about your personal brand, for example, which, if you think about it, is pretty upsetting, that we accept the idea that we are like cattle and we can be, yeah. So this workshop is not about this, but at the same time, we exist within, among, amidst. We all are participating in capitalism. It's just that sometimes academia invisibilizes it. And sometimes I think there's many ways that labor gets invisibilized in academia. There's ways that serves the purpose, the greater purpose of sometimes unethical labor practices and exploitation. I guess all that I want to say is we are all participating in capitalism, so we may as well learn to, I like to use the metaphor of dancing with capitalism. Let's be critical of it at the same time. I'm not here to say that, I'm really excited about the fact that you all, should be thinking about yourselves in terms of human capital. That said, when you approach the business world, you might hear more of these kinds of words. So I want us to be able to recognize them, understand what they're doing, understanding what they're meant to mean, and, use them to the extent that we need to use them to help ourselves be made legible on the labor market, but also find ways to retain your humanity in human systems. So that's what this workshop is not. The next slide is what this workshop is. I hope it's a continuation of what we talked about last time, paying attention. So the next slide is just a little bit of a recap of what we talked about. Last time we talked about finding your bright spots, finding things that spark your curiosity, your imagination, at the end of a long PhD process, you can sometimes forget why you started in the first place. So hopefully this exercise or this kind of thinking can help you reconnect with the things that first sparked your interest, the things that have sustained your interest over time, and figure out ways to make that visible in the way that we saw Tom kind of come alive when he was talking about his research. That's what this is about, right? Finding the pieces of our work that make us come alive so that others can see that, can connect to that spark. So the next slide. One term you may have heard, or two, I suppose, in talking about transferable skills are these so-called hard and soft skills. I don't know if folks have encountered this. Is this something people hear about? I'm mad about this, but it may not even be something that has come to your awareness. Um, Next slide. Soft skills, certainly used here in the States, maybe because it was invented here in the States. I was surprised to learn that this actually happened in 1972 as part of a training conference organized by the US Army. And in that conference, the decision was made to talk about soft skills versus hard skills, just because they were trying to differentiate between skills that involved working with metal, like metallic, like tanks and guns. And so they were only called soft skills because they didn't involve touching metal. And you see this is an excerpt from the publication from that conference. You'll see at the bottom here, soft skills are important job-related skills which involve little or no interaction with machines. The unfortunate thing that has happened is that, as these terms have been utilized over the decades, hard skills seem to be more important. Soft skills sound soft, they sound silly, they sound inconsequential. And I want to reclaim that because so many of the skills that we get trained in are the so-called soft skills. If you'll give the next slide, Tom. I think I mentioned to you last time, I work as internship coordinator at Boise State University, and this is what we are trained to teach to help our students recognize. These are the National Association of Colleges and Employers 8 buckets of career readiness. Leadership, communication, all of these, almost all of these are what might be qualified as soft skills. Yeah, emotional quotient, exactly. People skills. All of these, almost all of these are soft. So I want to reclaim that term because, first of all, it is a big part of what employers need. It's a huge piece of what they are looking for an employee. There does tend to be a disconnect. Job ads tend to be very much written in the hard skills, the things that are able to be taught more quickly. Probably they're easier to evaluate, right? Have you used Python or not? That's easier to evaluate than, how do you navigate a difficult situation and, keep good working relationships with your team. That's harder to demonstrate and evaluate and measure. But we have these in abundance. I would say communication, right? What we know about communication could be and is talked about in 300-page documents. So let's get into that. Now is when I was thinking we would hop over to the Google Doc and use. So last time we used this acronym of BRIGHTEN to talk about the worlds of work, business, research, ingenuity, government, healthcare, technology, education, and nonprofits. In the Google Doc, you may notice I've flipped the order a little bit because reasons. So let's get into it. The first one I wanted to talk about was, so E, what is the penultimate letter in my acronym? Because so often I hear people say, they don't want to leave academia, quote unquote, leave academia, because they like to teach. And so here in the education section of the acronym, I thought we could think about how we talk about teaching. For one thing, because there is a lot of teaching outside of the academy. The other point that I want to make here, though, is it's a point for all of these buckets. It really has to start with breaking down what you mean, right? Loving to teach could mean, I've put 4 things here. There's probably 400, and I'd welcome, these are all editable, so I'd welcome people to get in, +1, add an emoji, add a line. If folks know how to add a line, yeah, okay, so we need to go format table, insert row below, add lines, add columns. For one thing, often in the, and I don't even know what to call this right-hand column. Let's give it a title of like instructional design facilitation. This is actually what I do for my, what I call sometimes my bread and butter gig. I'm what some people might call a corporate trainer. I work in education. Turns out I don't really like to think about assessment, and I have to actually as part of my my job. So we don't call it assessment. We call it, oh gosh, at the end of a training, we give a feedback. We ask for feedback. We ask for, we often do that in the form of a survey. We try to build in formative assessments. Maybe that belongs in the right-hand side. But I have learned to call what I might do halfway through a training where I might incorporate a little quiz to see if people are following me, or, you know, I allow time for questions or places for people to post questions so that I can do sort of a rolling assessment to see if people are understanding what I'm picking up, what I'm putting down. For some people, you know, it's engaging with students that is so compelling and fascinating. Maybe this could be called mentoring. And that's certainly going to be part of what you would do as part of any job. I've heard many. Marco Crand is coming to mind. If people know that name, he's the man who invented Klingon. He spent the first few years post his PhD trying to get a job as a professor. It didn't work out for him. He found his way into working for the federal government and found that managing for him was a lot like what he loved about teaching, which was engaging with students. So he described people management as a place where he can use all of the things that he loved about teaching, you know, giving constructive feedback, these are difficult conversations in the working world. Sometimes people avoid these conversations. I say, for one thing, we're trained to be aware of conversation and how it works. For those of us who had teaching experience and then move over into a context where it's not explicitly education, I think we keep the big picture in mind and we'll give the difficult critical feedback, or ask for the difficult critical feedback, because we know, you know, we've spent a long time in educational context. We probably all of us value education. We value learning. We value growth. Oh, I love it. Critical thinking, breaking down complex ideas, managing group dynamics, captive. Yeah, that's, for some of us, can be a disadvantage moving into another context where we don't have a captive or engaged audience. But okay, if any of you know Daniel Pink, he's an organizational researcher. He says that as educators, what we do is we sell, like if you think about buying and selling, what you sell as an educator is, you know, attention. Give me your attention. I promise you it's worth it. So some of us may have had to think about how to teach concepts in engaging ways. What we are doing is asking people, we're making a bid for attention. We're telling people it's worthwhile to pay attention to what I'm talking about right now. There will be value in it. So any of you who chimed in, managing group dynamics, can you think about anything that you've learned from teaching that might be applicable, transferable to another context where you're working with people?
Hi, that one was me. I was thinking that it's a lot like chairing a meeting sometimes when you've got like lots of students, some of whom have lots to say, others of whom like need a bit of encouragement and space in order to share their
Yeah.
ideas. Mhm.
I find that, so in a lot of the work contexts I've been in, people say that they hate meetings. I think what they hate are meetings that are poorly run or, you know, poorly designed or poorly managed or not thought about. We think about if we're going to spend an hour as part of a class, we've thought about that time and we know how to frame it up, like we set expectations. Um, I don't think there's any reason to hate meetings, but we can recognize maybe that we have skills to make meetings more productive, more engaging. I think as a teacher, one of my strengths or something that I have learned to pay attention for, back to this idea of what was said and what wasn't, I'm very aware of who hasn't said anything, who hasn't spoken. And in a meeting, you've got to be thinking about who isn't talking and why and what could you be doing to make, even if you're not running the meeting, um, there's ways to engage those people. Probably many of the people who aren't talking, it's not because they don't have ideas. This context just isn't safe, or for whatever reason uh, hasn't been made inclusive. There's often a lot to be unpacked and explored there. Yeah, I don't think there's any lack of application of managing group dynamics in the working world. It might be called team building, trust building, breaking down complex ideas. Absolutely. I think we get trained to do this. Um, when we write papers too, or we present papers at conferences, oral presentations, it's one aspect of the communication capacity that we have. Yeah, pedagogical innovation, I might say, like thoughtful design of meetings, engagements. The book that I just read this summer, How We Gather, where for those who like to think about designing moments, that's a really interesting read. Making space for reflection. Yeah. God, if there's one thing that this world needs, it's more of that. One of my first jobs out of school, well, it was between grad school and after undergrad, before grad school, before my master's, I worked in an investment bank. And if I had to sum up what I learned, it would be that we need to make more space for reflection. This was Wall Street in the late 90s. Everyone was hurtling towards disaster, and nobody was taking any time to reflect. Nobody was taking any time to ask questions, challenge our assumptions, ask ourselves, do we really know what we were doing? I kept trying to ask my boss for clarification on a project that I was on. I came to realize I didn't think she understood it either. But that wasn't safe. You couldn't let anybody know that. So there was never any time for reflection. Questions were despised. And all of these practices were just contributing to what we now know was a giant crash. led by Wall Street, led us straight off a cliff. Awesome. Okay, so I put education first. Next, I put research because we get trained to do research. One of the case studies, or one of the, I don't want to say case studies because I've just told you case studies are one of the problems of the business world training. One application for our research skills, one place that's hiring now a lot, is the user experience world. They look for experience with research. I've applied for a few jobs as a UX researcher, and I find, I'll just be very honest here, when I start having to talk about research in ways that make it visible and break it down, here's where I get a little bit frustrated. I get really, yeah, I'm not proud of it, but as a researcher, you have to know how to do things like scope. You know, how many research participants do you need? How much time is this going to take? In a business world, you have to make the business case for your research. And by saying things like, how many is the minimum number of participants that we need to answer a particular research question? And maybe it was because it was one of the first jobs I tried to apply for after my PhD. I had a whole lot of feelings when I was being asked to describe how do you know how to scope. I took umbrage because I had been surrounded for a decade by other people who knew that we just all had to learn how to do this, but then forgot that we learned how to do this. So on the columns here, I put some terms that I've heard in the UX research world on the right hand side, and thought, could we think about how we talk about that in academia? So advocate for the user, that's in the UX research world, that's sort of considered innovative, you know, keeping the keeping the human, you know, putting the human at the center rather than profit or product. Yeah, community-based research, community ownership. We wouldn't necessarily call it human-centered design, but that's our field is human-centered. I hear a lot in UX about evangelizing your findings. That is used uncritically, which, as a child of a preacher, I can't use that term uncritically. I can't talk about evangelizing my findings. But this is a key competency in the UX research world. How do we talk about evangelizing findings? I'm going to put tacit knowledge. Is that right? Tacit is when you know it, but you don't know that you know it. Tactic, tacit. Implicit. Did I hear someone? Oh, evangelizing. Okay. So in the UX world, I haven't gotten a job in UX research. I've done some studies, but apparently what happens is, no, I can say that this is true from the experience that I've had. When you do this user-centered, human-centered research, you've got a different perspective than many of your colleagues do, who maybe have been asked to focus primarily on profit. So you have to say why your findings maybe show that something needs to be done differently. Maybe we need to remake some you know, I did a user study for a website we were developing, and, you know, the developers were charging ahead, wanting to get, you know, they were focused on time and deadline, and we were finding when we did our research that people weren't understanding, you know, even the welcome page. So rather than charging ahead, we needed to kind of slow things down and stop. But in order to do that, we had to, yes, you can absolutely access this document. It's one of the reasons I made it a Google Doc. Come back to this later. I will leave it open. So evangelizing your findings is telling your colleagues why they need to take your work into account, you know, enough so that you may have to evangelize your findings to the, you know, project manager who's there to decide how long things should be taking. It may be that you have to evangelize your findings to the budget officer, your boss. There's a lot of people making decisions about time and money in a business world. So being able to evangelize your findings means being able to get buy-in, get people to see the importance of your findings, the sorry, I got distracted by the chat for a second. It's a slide link. Working under pressure, used to meeting tight deadlines. Yeah, that's another, talk about another piece of tacit knowledge. I think in academia, we are not invited to think about how long things take, how many pressures we have, how much multitasking we have to do, switching gears. All of this gets invisibilized in so many ways. So have I described evangelizing findings? I would say in academia, maybe you do this to, you know, as part of a grant application. Or I know that there's at least one person on this call that's thought a lot about impact, when you have to make the impact of your work visible so that you can get funded, keep funded, keep your position. Data management. I put some of those into tech because that's a field of work where you might be called upon, or maybe they're advertising more often for jobs as data science, jobs in data science. But I would argue all of us are data scientists. We don't talk about ourselves that way, but we have been trained to be data scientists. Maybe tenure review. That's a place where you have to evangelize your findings if you're in an academic path. Those of us who are students, when we've had to defend our ideas, a dissertation defense might be a place where you evangelize your findings. All right. Also, so you know, there's another section for questions down a ways on the Google Doc. So as we work, if questions come up, one of the points I wanted to make, I don't know how many of you have looked into the healthcare communication world. Our next bucket down, healthcare communication. Here's a job ad here for a researcher. One of the things that's kind of maybe, oh no, I wanted to put it in the chat. Surprising when you look at a job ad like this one is that they seem to know at least what I have been trained in under job description. Training in interactional sociolinguistics, for example, conversation analysis, narrative analysis, ethnographic methods, sociolinguistic fieldwork, etc. You don't usually see that on job ads in quote unquote the business world. Healthcare communication, at least some of the firms in the eastern part of the United States, this is a place where a lot of linguists have kind of made our value, maybe they've evangelized their findings. They have made our value known such that now healthcare communication firms actively recruit linguists, or at least interactional sociolinguists. They know the skill set, they understand the skill set, they're looking for the skill set, and will ask for it. Not on this job ad, but in some job ads I've seen, you know, it's like training in phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics is a plus. I wanted to show you guys, and maybe I'll give it to you, Tom, to share. I was
sure, happy to. Yeah.
Can you, if you click on that LinkedIn, oh, is it gonna, well, let's see what happens.
You want me to share my screen?
Yeah, if it takes you to InVibe Labs posts.
I'd also quickly like to use this opportunity, just all those are my messages, just to say that we've had about an hour now, and I can see people starting to drop off. Anna-Marie, how much longer are you anticipating this session lasting?
I can wrap it up now.
No, not by any means. As long as people are finding it useful, then we're more than happy to stay around. But it's all up to you.
Well, you can see I'm working my way through my acronym.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I probably have too much content to cover in the time.
Sure. No, but that's always
so
a
now
good
might
thing.
be a time to open to discussion.
Yeah, whatever you think's best, actually. If you'd like to do a few more, I think maybe let's do one more of the acronyms initials that you think perhaps is like the most poignant, where linguists go the most or something. We can take a look at this LinkedIn post as well, and then we can wrap up for some conversation.
Sounds great.
Nice one. Okay, so I'm happy to scroll through here.
I appreciate you. Yeah. I just wanted to show InVibe is one of these research firms that hires lots of linguists and has hired lots of linguists. If you've been on LinkedIn, you'll know this is kind of an atypical post. They're posting language data and sharing what they see. A lot of their posts are like this. They're just, here, let's look at a bunch of language and see what we see, share what, you know, what we can learn from this. This one's about life with epilepsy. Notice, we hope that it will inspire us all to advocate. Yes, okay. Yeah. All right, so interpreters and translators, of course, absolutely. I think there's many ways that the medical world, and I think it's probably no accident that's a high stakes world. You might notice a lot of work contexts where the language is very high stakes tend to be very aware of linguists. So law, I would argue, the world of law is very aware of linguists and what we do. Air traffic control context. There are so many researchers who look at that or have looked at that context, such that now you hear people talking about things like mitigated speech in the context of pilot air traffic control interaction. That's not something that probably was top of mind before linguistic researchers did research, but now it has become part of, because it has been found to play such a big role in crashes that happen. Now that's something that people know to be paying attention to in that context. All right, let's look at the business bucket, because that's probably our biggest hurdle. In the business world, we talk about management of people, management of projects, management of products. Here's something that I think is completely invisibilized in academia. We are all just supposed to be good people managers, project managers, product managers. We're supposed to all know. This is one of the places where I see the work being invisibilized by academia. We are all project managers. We've had to be. Anyone who wrote a dissertation had to, look at a project, break it down into its constitutive parts, pay attention to who is responsible for what, when, who needed to be coordinated at what stage and how, what the timelines were, what the deadlines were, manage all of those people and projects to stay online. So we don't talk about it as project management. We would talk about it maybe as independently conducting a research project. Independent research. Conducting research. In the business world, you'll hear a lot of talk about stakeholders, cross-functional teams. This is just, cross-functional teams are just, teams where people have they come from different disciplines, they have different perspectives, have different aims sometimes, right? So a cross-functional team might have, say, a graphic designer and a marketing professional. They have slightly different ways of thinking, ways of doing things. But what it boils down to is that in a meeting, say, we need to figure out a way to have the designer understand what the marketer needs and have the marketer understand what the designer needs. This is all about, how did we say it before? Making space for reflection, designing meetings that allow time for reflection. Stakeholders, that might be a big pill to swallow. It's really just people that have a stake in our work. This is an example of a term that I like for its precision. Sometimes business speak is quite precise. I think it's important to remember who has a stake in what we're doing. You can sometimes get caught up in the day-to-day of work and not be paying attention to who has a stake and what is their stake in this work. I work for a social change communication think tank. Sometimes we produce reports that are about 75 pages long. I don't think that my research colleagues always have our stakeholders top of mind, because most of our stakeholders don't have time to sit down and read a 75-page research report. So could do with a little bit of thought about, who needs this work. Remembering to design, just like we learned as teachers to design deliverables. Oh, that's a big one. Insert row below deliverables.
If I could also add something to this one here as well. In my experience in the business world, so alongside my PhD, I also work part-time as a consultant for an English testing company. What I found, one skill that I have that doesn't seem like, maybe at least in my company, it seems to be sometimes absent, to speak politically, is longer term thinking.
Oh.
A lot of business problems are within a few weeks to a few months scope, and it's essentially always around, excuse my language, shit, where's the money coming from? That's like very simply how to put it. And in academia, we have to think in months and years in terms of project lengths.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite programmed to think like that. And then when I see a strategy, quote unquote, which is do this thing to get this money in via this mechanism or this market or this group of people or whatever, and then I say, well, is this actually going to work, and is this sustainable, and how long is it going to take, and is this going to work the way you think it will, and that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's what I find in the business world. It's something that I really think about a lot.
And it really calls upon you to you have to kind of cultivate an internal compass. That's a beautiful example to end on. I think you get called upon a lot to decide what is quality, what is necessary. I mean, it comes back to that question that I told you I was asked to scope out a project. What I think, if you're truly holding, the research or our training, I think you would be a researcher that might advocate for bigger projects, longer timescales, more data. And it's going to constantly be anathema to our colleagues who want to do it faster, cheaper, and you have to compromise often. But if you can find a way, if you can find the context in which you can compromise in a way that still feels like you're hanging on to your integrity, that's really it. That's the challenge in a nutshell, Tom. Beautiful.
Yeah, precisely. I think so. So if you have nothing else to say really, Anna-Marie, with the time that we have, what I'd like to do is open to our remaining participants to ask you any questions. I think this is a really, really useful opportunity. Anna-Marie has a wealth of experience across a number of sectors and tutoring people to get jobs across a number of sectors. If you are unsure about exactly what your PhD gives you for the quote-unquote real world, if you have a specific sector that you're interested in that you'd like to learn more about, how to write, cover letters or good CVs for, or what skills they're looking for in that sector and how you can translate your abilities. If you just want to, have some reassurance that actually you haven't wasted your life and you are actually very employable, you just need to work out how to make yourself employable. The floor is really for you guys right now to ask these questions. But there's just some suggestions. We already have one in the chat.
Yeah, it's a great one. I think, people are people. Some people have a negative reaction. My current employer, my boss, I showed up for my job interview and someone else was advocating for me, and he himself has a PhD, but said, I don't know if you are going to do, like we were just discussing, are you willing to, like my sense from your materials is that you are going to be really precious, and you're not going to be willing to work to a deadline, and that you're going to, not be able to work as part of a team. All of the negative stereotypes you hear about PhDs. So yeah, you may encounter it, unfortunately.
I think it also depends where as well. Like, yeah. I've noticed in journalism, people who have random PhDs are often celebrated in a kind of like, oh, well, I'm a journalist, I'm a news journalist, but I did a PhD in, analytic philosophy in Germany. I think that would be like celebrated. So it kind of depends on the culture to which, but I guess that's not really corporate. You were mentioning corporate space.
Yeah, it really depends.
Yeah, for sure.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, for context, I'm coming from prior to starting my master's, I actually was working as a quality assurance engineer. So I did a lot of script writing and this kind of thing. So hence my question focusing when I say corporate, even more specifically, to be honest, I'm kind of thinking in terms of software, but always kind of keeping that in the back of my mind, something that I might end up needing to return to should academia in its sort of classical sense not really work out.
I think I'm not the expert Anna-Marie is. I have some sort of corporate experience as much as my PhD as well. And what I notice often is that it's easy to forget your worth as a PhD holder. I think you can hold yourself with a bit more gravitas and demand a bit more respect and authority, and ultimately what we care about really, unfortunately for the post late stage capitalism, money, right? So the negative reactions might be might respond, might come as a response maybe to like thinking you're overqualified, or maybe even some sort of jealousy. I don't know. So that's often a little bit about choosing the right role as well, I think. Sorry, Anna-Marie, I'm going to shut up now.
No, that's great. I would just, there is all kinds of prejudice out there, and unfortunately, we'll be confronted probably with many sort of unfair prejudgments based on gender, age, class, culture, ethnicity. I could say a lot, but I guess what I want to say is, yeah, like Tom is saying, remember your worth. I hope a lot of this was designed to help you know your worth, help you see your worth, remember your worth. Hopefully you can surround yourself with other people who also see your worth and help you remember when times are tough. Help you see what you bring. Oh, I guess we lost Tom. One of his committee members is going to close the session. Okay. So any last questions? Thank you for participating in the Google Doc. Oh, and that reminds me to mention, I'm pulling together a panel for January. Our next session is in January. And I'm hoping to have somebody from, well, I'm working on a few people who maybe I shouldn't say where they work because they need to ask their bosses for permission. That's another thing you might encounter outside academia. But yes, I agree, Suzanne. NHS is a really interesting context. It'd be great. Maybe we'll have somebody on our panel from NHS or government, other government agencies. I've got 5 people so far that I think are confirmed, but you know how these things go. Some people need permission, but we will have a panel, most of whom are in the UK, and hopefully representing a range of career paths for you all to learn about. Yeah, but I have found a PhD valued. I do a lot of contracting with government clients here in the States, and in many government contexts, PhD is highly valued and sought after. I'll just put in a plug. If anyone happens to be going to the Linguistics Society of America meeting, I don't know. We're having our meeting in January, and I'm going to be talking about consulting work that I've done with public health departments here in the States. I've had a year-long consulting project where I've been helping public health departments, do their work of advocating for the health of the community. And as a linguist, it's brought up a lot of questions for me along the same lines of this conversation that we've just been having. How can I bring my skills to help them amplify their goal in this context that I have come to realize is something that I deeply value, health. And in many ways, health is under attack for various reasons in the policies that are being put out. Anyways, thank you for this. Thank you for engaging with the Google Doc. As I say, I'll keep it open. Chime in. Connect with me on LinkedIn. We're partway through our journey. There will be more to come.
Thank you, Anna. I'm the one who is gonna take over for the closing. Thank you. I'm late, but there are a few points I want to remind you guys for the audience, and thank you, Anna, for for so much content from the first one, which was a general introduction, and then the second one we get into more specific areas of the the skills we can transfer as a linguist, and in the future, and you will be talking more about and also bring people from the field who are already working in the industry, and which I think will be our next talk, right?
January. Yep.
Yes, and I'm very looking forward to it. And also for the crowd, we have new committee position opened, and that will be our chair and secretary position. So if you are up for those opportunities, please check out our website. And then we also have our funding, which is going to be closed for February the 15th, and that will also be detailed on our website. And more information if you are in our WhatsApp group, and you can just DM us and ask any questions. And also we for our next summer school, we would like to have some ideas for the speakers. If you have any speakers you really want to talk to, and you can recommend to us. And yeah, thank you so much, Anna Marie. I'm sorry that I'm late for the first and the second of your talk, but I'm really looking forward for the future talks. And thank you so much for doing this for us. And a lot of my cohort also talked to me that really informative by what you're talking about, because they never thought about those things. And it's really insightful. Yeah, really broadening their views. So yeah, really many positive feedbacks. Yeah,
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, see ya. Bye. See you back in January. Happy holidays. Bye, guys. Bye.